All right, folks, today we're discussing 5 reasons that CNN is fake news. This particular video is sponsored by Raycon. So let me just preface all of this by saying there are some good reporters over at CNN. Not everything that is on CNN is fake news, but CNN promoting itself as an apple is an apple, a banana is a banana, an apple is not a banana, the most trusted name in news, free of bias, free of all sorts of subjectivity problems. All of that's nonsense. That's the part that's nonsense. What we mean is that when they proclaim they are an objective news source, that obviously is not true. There are 5 specific areas in which we can clearly say that CNN is fake news. Number 1, selection bias. So there are a couple of different kinds of bias when you do a story. There's the bias that exists within a story, for example. Right? There's bias where you just kind of slide the opinion right into the story. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But there's a broader problem of bias, and that is the selection bias. What kind of news do you choose to cover? So we here at Daily Wire, we're biased, we're conservative. We choose to cover certain types of news because we find it more interesting. CNN, however, says they are objective in their news coverage. And then you have the head of CNN announcing just this last week that he was actually going to hire a new race team, not like Indy 500 race team, like an actual team just to cover racial issues, because it is very obvious to Jeff Zucker that the biggest issue in America right now is racial unrest, which of course CNN has been driving. I mean, CNN has been promoting the idea that America is a deeply evil country. America is a deeply racist country. America is systemically bigoted. Do you think there will be a lot of ideological diversity inside that particular level of coverage? I think not. Selection bias is when you spend 2 years promoting Trump-Russia conspiracy theories without any real hard evidence, proclaiming the evidence is just around the corner. And here's just a brief montage of some of the Trump-Russia over-the-top stuff.
Bombshell. Bombshell. Bombshell.
Bombshell.
The biggest bombshell.
BuzzFeed's latest bombshell.
Bombshell.
Maybe the most damning allegation yet.
If true.
If true. If true.
If true. Important caveat.
If true, could mean the president obstructed justice.
The president's going to lose his job.
The Trump presidency would be over. That's fueling new talk of impeachment.
Historically, it's a beeline to impeachment.
But, yeah, so whoa.
This president committing a federal crime.
Latest on the Robert Mueller Russia investigation. Mueller investigation, the Russia investigation, Trump's Russia ties, and Robert Mueller. The real Russia story, Russia probe, the ongoing Russia probe, the Russia investigation. But Mueller and the Russia probe, Russia synergies, they wonder if Russia has compromising information on the president. What is the source for the president's claim that they have found no collusion with Russia? He misspelled collusion. Every day we're trying to keep track of the drip, drip, drip of the Russia investigation. Drip, 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 Trump and Russia. To see whether Trump was secretly working for Russia. To bring it back to Russia and Russia and Russia. 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 Russia's the Russia. 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 And Russia.
Russia, Russia, Russia. Breaking news, breaking news. It was always breaking news. And it turned out the news never broke. It turns out the whole narrative was just not true. That's what CNN does. And then they find another narrative that narrative doesn't work. And then sometimes they'll actually just falsify that narrative. Like, for example, Covington Catholic. Let's assume for a second that that had been a true story, that CNN had covered a kid who was making fun with a smile of a Native American. He was making fun, wearing a MAGA hat. Why is that a national news story? Isn't that a local news story? Does that rise to the level of everyone in America needs to know about this? Well, of course not, but it's a selection bias issue. Why exactly does CNN decide that they have to cover, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests without covering the number of people who are being shot in nearly the same way in New York and Chicago, the vast wave in crime that is now engulfing cities around the United States? Well, because, of course, it's a selection bias issue. One narrative matters and one doesn't. Number 2, claims of objectivity. So remember, CNN keeps claiming that pretty much all of its hosts are objective news anchors. And this, of course, is absolute sheer nonsense. And the anchors themselves know this. And if they don't, then they're just being foolish. So Don Lemon will claim that he is objective. In fact, just in the last couple of weeks, he went on another TV show and he said, well, you know what? I am an objective journalist. And when I speak about race, it's my truth. Take a listen to this.
My role as a journalist is to speak from my truth and from my lens and from where I come from. And I don't think those things are biases. I am a Black man who grew up and who lives and survives and works in America. I have a certain perspective and a certain point of view, and I'm bringing that important part of the diverse culture of this company to the fore, and I should be. And so the people who don't want to hear that, who don't want to hear my truth, will say to you that I am biased. I'm not biased. This is my truth as a Black man in America.
Those are contradictory. Once you say it is your truth, it is not the truth. It is not an objective claim. It is a subjective claim about your personal anecdotal experiences. That's not objectivity. That is subjectivity. Or when CNN has Chris Cuomo interview his brother, and they do their buddy comedy routine from Step Brothers with John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, right? And Chris Cuomo just does this, right? They're going to demonstrate to each other how much did mom love you best. absolutely objective. Jim Acostaing all over everything. Okay? And ladies, find you a man who loves you like Jim Acosta loves Jim Acosta. Is there any question that Jim Acosta is a motivated player in this? Jim Acosta celebrates his attempts to kind of goad President Trump so he can get a headline.
Mr. President, will you stop calling us the enemy of the people, sir? Will you stop calling the press the enemy of the people, sir? Mr. President, will you stop calling the press the enemy of the people, sir?
Is that objectivity? I think not. Number 3, the chyrons. So the chyron writer at CNN is basically just an editorialist. It's pretty incredible, actually. So if you have noticed, CNN chyrons have become more and more opinionated. So for example, just in the last few weeks, there was a report on Mount Rushmore, and the chyron writer decided that they were going to write in the chyron that President Trump was celebrating, quote unquote, Independence Day. They put independence in scare quotes. Now, the actual official name of the holiday, Independence Day, is Independence Day. You don't have to scare quote it. The reason for scare quoting it was the idea that America was not actually celebrating its independence on July 4th. America was celebrating its brutality and vicious evil. But the reporter here is also egregious. She says that Mount Rushmore is stolen Native American land with 2 slaveholders on it. Listen to this clip from CNN, the most trusted name in news.
As Americans face a reckoning over racism, past and present, there's no message of healing from the White House. Instead, President Trump is calling a Black Lives Matter street mural a symbol of hate.
And Jake, kicking off the Independence Day weekend, President Trump will be at Mount Rushmore, where he'll be standing in front of a monument of 2 slave owners and on land wrestled away from Native Americans, told that be focusing on the effort to, quote, tear down our country's history.
The CNN chyron writers, they do this sort of stuff all the time. I remember maybe a few months back, there was this vast pro-gun Virginia rally, and CNN decided to feature a chyron about a mass shooting at the same time as the pro-gun Virginia rally. It had nothing to do with the story. They just left it up on the screen. Or, for example, CNN's tendency to use fact-checking chyrons with President Trump. So what they'll do is they'll say, Trump claims X, and then in parentheses, he didn't. Right? They don't do any of that stuff for Democrats. They never do that with Joe Biden. They only ever do this with President Trump. That is a particular kind of bias. That is not news. That is editorializing. If you want to come on afterward and then fact check what the president said and do that in even-handed fashion, that is one way to do it. But very often, the chyrons actually are not even real fact checks. Very often, they are fact-checking implications, which is something that so-called objective news sources like to do. So Trump will say something 100% true. Like he'll say, we're doing more raw tests than anybody in America. And then they'll say, wrong. On a per capita level, we are not. It's like he didn't say per capita. He said we're doing more tests in America than anywhere else, which is true. And the chyron writers, they're just liars very often. Now, I know you're enjoying this video, which means you're probably listening on wireless earbuds. And if you're listening on the wrong wireless earbuds, you're doing it wrong, which is why you need Raycon. Raycon is great. They've got these wireless earbuds that come without the stems. They come without the wires. They fit your ear perfectly, which is one of the great things. They're not one size fits all. Right? It comes with a card. The card has a variety of fits. You can stick it in your ear, and it fits perfectly and blocks out the sound of your children screaming at you. I know, I've tried it myself. It comes in a variety of colors and patterns. They are super comfortable. And again, they come with that variety of fit options I find super convenient. The compact carrying case can charge earbuds 4 times on a single charge. Unlike some of your other wireless options, Raycon earbuds, again, stylish, discreet, no dangling wires, no stems. They are great for video chats. They are great for listening to videos like this one. Raycon earbuds also start at about half the price of any other premium wireless earbuds on the market, and they sound just as amazing as the other top audio brands. You know, Raycons are great from working from home, working out, listening to music and podcasts for hours without driving anyone else crazy or them driving you crazy. Their everyday E25 earbuds, those are the best model yet. 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, more bass, a more compact design that gives you that nice noise-isolating fit. Click the link in the description below. You get 15% off your order right now. Again, click that link in the description below. Get 15% off your order of Raycons. Number 4, creation of narratives. So there's a good movie with Jake Gyllenhaal called Nightcrawler. In that movie, Jake Gyllenhaal originally plays sort of this stringer who goes around taking photographs of car crashes. He brings them to the local news channel, and then the news channel airs them, and this is how he makes his money. He realizes at a certain point that he can actually craft the narrative. He can be the narrative. And so he starts to actually involve himself in crimes so he can be the first person on the scene in order to craft the narrative. And then he becomes like this big-time reporter because of all of this. Now, CNN kind of does this. Okay, CNN crafts narratives by basically deciding what to cover, how to cover those things. The most obvious narrative that CNN has crafted in the past few months is the idea that Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York was good at his job. So they had Chris Cuomo interview him every day, and Andrew Cuomo got to go on and just do propaganda hour with his brother.
I hope you are able to appreciate what you did in your state and what it means for the rest of the country now, and what it will always mean to those who love and care about you the most. I'm wowed by what you did, and more importantly, I'm wowed by how you did it. This was very hard. I know it's not over, but obviously I love you as a brother. Obviously I'll never be objective. Obviously I think you're the best politician in the country. But I hope you feel good about what you did for your people, because I know they appreciate it. Nothing's perfect. You'll have your critics.
Thank you.
But I've never seen anything like what you did, and that's why I'm so happy to have had you on the show.
They kept saying over and over that Andrew Cuomo, they chose press conferences live. Look at what a strong leader he is. At this point, 33,000 people have died in New York, a multiple of any other state in the union, like a vast multiple over states like Florida, which of course Ron DeSantis is a bad guy. But there's a narrative that has to be promulgated at CNN. And that narrative is Democrats good, Republicans bad, therefore DeSantis bad, Cuomo good. And it's absolute nonsense. Or how about the creation of the narrative that Black Lives Matter is only about police brutality? That Black Lives Matter, it really doesn't apply to all Black Lives Matter. This is something Don Lemon said openly.
The Black Lives Matter movement was started because it was talking about police brutality. If you want an all Black Lives Matter movement that talks about gun violence in communities, including, Black communities, then start that movement with that name.
Why shouldn't we be concerned about Black lives lost through a wide variety of other means and in numbers far greater than those lost in police brutality? But more than that, it's obviously also not true, right? The fact is that BLM as an organization is extraordinarily radical. They're a neo-Marxist organization. They make this absolutely clear on their website, but this is not up for debate over on CNN. So CNN has a narrative to push. The narrative is America's racist and the police are bad, and they will ignore any other issues that complicate that narrative, including the issue that the Black Lives Matter organization is not just about police brutality, and also that the greatest threats to Black life in the United States do not come from the cops. And in fact, lack of cops provides probably a greater threat, not probably, certainly a greater threat to Black life than presence of cops in Black communities. Okay, other narratives, how about the Brett Kavanaugh was probably a rapist narrative? Right? Christine Blasey Ford, hero. Brett Kavanaugh, evil, white villain. Okay, where was the evidence? Turns out the evidence completely fell apart. Number 5, ignoring facts completely. Covington Catholic, they'll just run with that story. And then when it turns out that the story's not true, when it turns out that these kids were actually being harassed by Black Hebrew Israelites.
When you get old enough, they're going to steal your organs. Whoa, hey! Get out! Whoa, you ain't seen a movie? Why you being mean? Get out!
It turns out that they'll just twist the narrative into, but what if it had been true? What if it had been true? Or how about ignoring the rioting and the looting that happened throughout the United States during the George Floyd protests, saying they were, quote unquote, mostly peaceful?
It has been entirely peaceful. Bottle thrown.
And mostly peaceful is a qualifier that is only used for protests that CNN particularly likes.
Really just an ugly, dangerous scene at the state capitol in Michigan.
Those pictures and those clashes really show the chaos.
And you're out there with guns?
These quote-unquote protests, I don't even think that that's the right word, because protests are supposed to be peaceful.
Imagine if the anti-lockdown protests had broken into mass violence in which full streets were basically burned to the ground and every store was tagged and windows had to be boarded up. Do you think that it would have been mostly peaceful anti-lockdown protests?
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite.
So the facts just get completely ignored. Or the facts about Christine Blasey Ford, right? The fact that her allegations turned out to be not only evidenceless, but that every piece of evidence she cited ended up falling apart. Right? She said that there were people there who said that they were not there. She couldn't remember where this happened or when this happened. And yet she was the heroine of the hour. Here's the bottom line. CNN is just like every other quote-unquote journalistic outlet. They've got their biases. The problem with CNN is that CNN lies overtly about their own biases. CNN will say they are the most trusted name in news. They simply are not. They are not in the news business. They are in the same business I am in, the opinion journalism business. The difference is, I'm honest enough to admit it, whereas they'll lie to you. So there you have it, 5 reasons why CNN is fake news. If you liked this video and you want to see more like it, leave a comment below.